right, everybody. Happy Memorial Day weekend. Um, we're glad you're with us, and hopefully this will be a recording that a lot of people will watch. We know it's a tough time for everybody to get away to do a webinar, but for those of you who are with us, we're glad that you're here, and just wanted to do a couple things of housekeeping before we get started. So just so you all know, there's a 20-second delay. So if you're asking a question in the chat feature, which we hope you do, we're more than willing to answer those. Just realize it may take a little bit to respond. If you're having trouble with anything, just know that this will be posted to Coach Drive's YouTube. And so just subscribe to our YouTube channel and you'll get those there. And we'll also are posting this as a podcast that you'll be able to get on all the, the main sites for podcasts. And then finally, the last thing is just know that we're, giving some free and premium courses on CoachTube. It'll be under the Coach Drive username. And so we hope that you all are able to subscribe and kind of go deeper with the stuff that we're talking about. So real quick, just introduce ourselves. I'm Brett Gresham. I was a coach with Brandon and Thad. I did special teams and defensive backs, and working with them, we just desired to reach more kids, and we felt the best way that we could do that is to reach out to more coaches and allow them to, share the stuff that we feel is necessary, to kind of help coaches and their values and their mission and, identifying and aligning themselves in their program to who they are. So just glad y'all can be with us tonight.
Thad Wells, head football coach, athletic director, teacher, new position at Richlands High School in Virginia. Like Brett was saying, we got together a couple years ago and just started really talking about the desire to influence beyond just our team. And honestly, we were talking about this week. We can remember a 7-on-7 where we were kind of sitting in on the stands waiting for our guys' turn to go. And we were just sitting back and watching some other coaches coach and just listening to some negativity and just not really a lot of positive thoughts with that. And that was a big push forward, is seeing those type of things. And then also, you see all kinds of talk on culture today. You have a lot of companies that talk about it, coaches talk about it, clinic videos, all that stuff on we got to have a good culture, which is 100% true, I guess. But what we're seeing is, how do you, one, it's talking about, coming up with your mission statement, all that, which is, again, what we're about to, you got to have those things. You got to, have some kind of core, but it's also putting all this in place and also knowing kind of what we'll be getting into eventually tonight is just knowing, the reason for this stuff. And we also know that if you don't have the time to invest into your program, none of this happens. So, and then if you put all your time into your program and nothing left for your home life and your family, then that kind of takes away from everything. So it's just been a very big desire to just help coaches and reach more than just our own kids. So.
Yeah. So I'm Brandon Compton. I've been a defensive coordinator for the last few years. And I'm blessed to be a part of this circle here with these guys. And it's something that we weren't, trying to extend outward. And it's like, Coach Wells just kind of touched on knowing your purpose and having a purpose-driven life, and being a part of that and showing that and being an example to other people is pretty important to myself. And as somebody that's, working their way through the coaching ranks, it's something I desperately want to make sure that I'm mentoring to our kids, not just our student athletes, but our faculty, to our parents, to everyone there, that, family is important, and that, knowing your why, knowing your purpose is part of that picture. And there's so much more that we can all accomplish other than just X's and O's. So it's pretty awesome to be here with you guys today.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is, you're not going to get X's and O's stuff. And, there's plenty of places for that, but, we're just really wanting people to be introspective about themselves and just to be the best people that they can be. And that's really what tonight's all about. And Thad's going to kind of recap our last webinar, because where we leave off with that is where we want to launch for tonight. So Thad, will you share that?
Yeah. So last week we talked about the coordinator's dilemma, and that was kind of, short end of that was, whether you want to be a head coach or you already are a head coach, or you're, just want to be a position coach, coordinator, whatever with your life. It's just, that thought that it's kind of a call to action, meaning if you're going to be a successful coach, you have to grow. You have to seek growth and coaching. There's so many areas to improve in. And that's kind of our whole thing from last week was, now, even if you just want to be a position coach and you have, your one position or if you're just working with a certain group in your sport, then there's still a lot to that. And at the very minimum, it's knowing your sport and how to coach your sport and your techniques and all those things. But really, it's about knowing humans and human nature and knowing, how to handle all these things. But then if you are wanting to be a head coach, then you add a gigantic list of things to be competent in. And one of the things that we just really believe in is that a lot of people just don't think enough. And to be honest, I'm not saying we don't think, but a lot of us just focus on like today or like maybe this week's game or whatever. And some good coaches will at least look, okay, maybe a year down the road, right? What about a year down the road with our program? I'm looking at next year's team. But what we're looking at is this much bigger picture, really zooming out to see everything and trying to come up with a bigger vision. Somebody that can become a head coach or want to be a head coach and know that, what would it look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And then ultimately we're really talking about our lives. What are our lives going to look like, with however many years I have that I'm blessed with. And so we're really just trying to get last week, trying to get people to think about all the things that go into coaching and then push them to try to, if you think about coaching, there's a lot of meanings you could put into the words coach and drive, but we're really trying to drive that motivation to grow, to seek daily growth in all and that's why I love sports so much. And coaching is that it's not just like, one little thing to do. Like you have so many areas to grow in. So that means you have your entire life to get better. And that's what's exciting. And so the very last thing we mentioned was, we're trying, are you just what kind of game are you playing? Right? Are you just playing your sport? Let's say that, I coach basketball and my game is basketball and I know the rules of the game. I know the rules of recruiting or whatever it is, and I'm playing basketball. Or would you like to play a more noble game that you have your sport and your game, but then you also have life? And so are you going to mix your sport and the life together? And one of the ways I think about it sometimes, and the word I use a lot is alchemy. And so alchemy is basically like this, it's more of a thought, a lot of people would say like alchemy was like trying to lead into gold, but really it was a metaphor for taking your life and using some kind of passion to turn it into something else. And so I think about, I coach football primarily. And so I'm thinking about the alchemy of football. So because there are people that like our sport, right? Like everybody likes their sport or their multiple sports. Because there's attraction there, you can do good with it. Fred Rogers, one of my favorite quotes was him. He was talking about a speech when it comes to came to like accepting a lifetime award for his show for kids. And he was talking about how, when you're responsible for something, when you are in the limelight or whatever, and you have attention of people, it's your responsibility to make good of it. And so, that's what, what are you trying to play? So let's try to play a more noble game. All right. And so tonight we're going to start getting into creating this bigger vision for this bigger game that we want to play, this game of life. And it's not just your life, it's your people's life, all the people around you, whether it's your team, your family, the fans, administration, your school, whatever it is. There's a big network that you're playing a lot bigger game, and you have to choose to do that or not. And so, but as we'll see us talking, it's about that vision to start with. But then a vision is nothing if you can't execute that. But before you can execute it, you have to have systems. So you have a vision, you have the systems, and then you have the execution of the systems to create to hit on that vision. So that's kind of our leeway, I guess, into tonight.
Yeah, and I mean that's as we think about that, I think Thad, you've touched on a lot there, but our whole process that we're hoping to get with these webinars and our courses and everything is to develop all of those things, is to help you develop a system, to help you in your execution of it. Whether that's the webinar right now or, us getting in touch with somebody outside of this space, to be able to just have those conversations. I think that's what's really important. And I think right now in this COVID-19 era, in this time that we're in, a lot of people are just kind of like, okay, I'm just barely getting by today. And, actually it's kind of the story of the Exodus. If anybody, remembers that, where here the Israelites get away from the Egyptians and they're like, hey, we're in the wilderness and this is scary. Oh, I'd rather go back and die in captivity. Right. And so we hear a lot of talk about, what, I just want to get back to normal. That's not going to happen. And so you have to have a way of thinking post-crisis for yourself, for your teams, for your community, whatever that may be. And instead of having that mentality of running back to what was, but to be able to think, forward and have that vision. And a lot of times that starts with yourself. And so tonight we're going to be talking about a book called Rhythm of Life, by Matthew Kelly. Great book. It discusses everything that we've been talking about just now. And the biggest thing is that I take from it, right, is this idea that you must have vision. You've got to be thinking ahead. You've got to be thinking about where you want to be. You got to be thinking about that, that future that produces a passion in your heart that you want to get to. And where are you going? You're not going backwards. So if you're going forward, you got to have some type of vision. We've, seen you have a lot of books out there for that. I think, a big one is, Andy Stanley and Visioneering. It's one that we've liked a lot. And, there's just a lot of good stuff in that book too. So, but we'll be kind of going through several books tonight to kind of discuss vision. Brandon, you're a big person on Andy Stanley and Visioneering. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I've been reading a ton of his stuff lately. And Visioneering is a great book, and I highly recommend a read. It's something that kind of like, I feel like I've always had a driven life, right? Like I've always had a vision of my life, and something that kind of popped off to me was vision often starts with the inability to accept the way things are. And that really stood out to me, because I thought, I'm living a vision life because I'm doing good things, or I'm doing things the right way, or whatever that may be. But reading this book, it really kind of illuminated me in the process of what visioneering really is, and what that really means to have a vision for your life. And there's 4 basic components to that. The problem, right? The things that you can't accept, your solution, which is like your call to action, and then the reason something must be done, and then the reason that something must be done right now, like in this very moment. Whether that's a big step, a small step, whatever that is, it's a powerful thing to take note of, and to journal about, or think about, or to reflect on. And so for me, as someone that I thought, that I was living that purposeful life, visioneering really challenged my thought process on that. And I'm sure you guys can attest to that also. It really challenged me to take a look at, and the book even talks about that. Take time to question and challenge your vision, right? Like interrogate your vision, to go at your vision, and really think about it full circle. And and that's where most visions die, right? Most visions die in that moment of thinking, okay, like I can't act on this right this second. I need to learn more, or I need to figure things out more. And so it's like going through that trial and coming out on the other side, and then going into action. So the book is awesome, and it really challenges the way you think on things. And so I would really recommend that.
I think a big piece of it that I've always enjoyed with Andy Stanley is that there's the idea of like, you have your big vision of where you want to go, but there's also those wildly important goals. It's those,
right.
those short things that are going to help you get there. And that's part of the systems and the steps that you're going to need. And we're going to kind of talk about what that looks like. You know, there's a big video out there. It's been out there for a while. It's by Michael Jr. It's called Know Your Why. And in this video, I'm going to put it here in the chat so y'all can check it out. You know, as you can, but in this video, he's you know, kind of a comedian, and he's up there on the stage, and he picks out a guy and he says, hey, you know, sing Amazing Grace for me. And this guy, he sings Amazing Grace. And I mean, somebody that's not musically inclined like myself, I would say he did an amazing job. It was, you know, something star worthy. And he said, you know, everybody thinks that this guy did a good job, right? And everybody's like, yeah, that was awesome. And then he says, now I want you to think that, you know, your cousin or your nephew or somebody just got out of jail. And I want, you know, now that you have that, I want you to sing Amazing Grace again. Give me the Amazing Grace when you have that, you know, sense of purpose. And this guy does it even better than he did before. And the idea is that, you know, when we have that vision, right, when we have that why, he said that he sang it so much better because he had a reason why. And so when we talk about vision, we're talking about knowing your why. Simon Sinek is an awesome person. He has several books about Start With Why and Find Your Why. You know, it's before you can have vision for your program, your community, you've got to have vision for yourself. Where are you going and how are you going to get there? I know Simon Sinek talks about the golden circle, and Brandon, you've loved a lot of that stuff. So,
yeah. So, you know, and thinking about visioneering and how it ties into, you know, start with why. When you start with why, it's typically a call to action, and it is usually the only emotion that stirs people to move, right? Like if you start with your what or your how, you're not necessarily going to call people into action. And I guess I kind of jumped the gun. So if you look at the golden circle, it looks like a bullseye. And in the very center of that bullseye is your why. So it's the smallest, most inner circle. And then the second round of that would be your how. And then the third round would be your what. And so like a lot of companies, you know, start off with their what they do and how well they do that. And a lot of people will do the same thing. Like, hey, I'm a coach and I do it really well. But they don't start with why. Right. And so they're not telling people like why they're doing things. And so without that little piece of the puzzle, you know, you're really not calling people to act. You know, if you think about Apple and all their products, they're why first. And they create a lot of movement in what they do and the products that they sell because they start with why. They talk about why they do things. They want to challenge the status quo. That's their why. And so they don't spend, I mean, they spend their fair share, but you know, they reach other people that, you know, maybe they shouldn't reach, right? They're probably not the best MP3 format, but they sell a ton of those things because of their why. You know, we could get into technology debates all day, but people associate with that and it calls them to action. And that could be applied to your life like it is to their business model. And so to be able to share that is pretty powerful, you know?
One of the things you touched on was Apple right there. And I know like they get beat to death in this. I mean, everybody talks about Apple, especially because of Simon talking about Apple and his, I think it was this TEDx talk or his TED talk with.
Yeah, it was a TED talk.
Yeah. And so he mentioned Apple. And so that gets kind of like beat over that. But I'm telling you, like, it's just like, it's weird. Like, I get it. I know we were just joking around before we even started tonight. Over the last like 2 weeks, I've made a silly investment in too many Apple things. Literally, the amount of money on my body at one point in time that's Apple is really absurd, and especially when I get onto my computer to work. So but
I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, I see them there. I mean,
AirPods.
I got the Pros the week. I got the watch, phone, new MacBook. Like I said, like again, well, it is what it is. But not saving a lot of money right now with a lot of various reasons. But but my whole point is like the feeling I get. Like, so when you think about the reason I'm talking about this is because like when you're starting to vision your life and you're trying to vision a program, and it's like you're trying to get this feeling. A lot of this is about this feeling, like every day that you have this energy that you're excited to do what you're about to do, and like the fact is, like, everything you do with Apple, at least for myself, because I'm connected to it, is like when you open anything, everything is thought out. Like the boxes themselves, not even the boxes. Like the shipping box was different than at least last week. The shipping box was different than anybody else's shipping box I've had in terms of like the thought that went behind it and how smart and efficient it was. But then even opening the crappy wrapper on the outside was like smart in terms of how it felt. But then, so the best example I have on the and I know they've been out for a couple years now, but on the MacBook Pro, it's the haptic clicking. Like, it just gets me. Like, when I click on any other computer, I'm like, it's just a click. But when I click on a Mac, like, I literally am like, ooh, yeah, like, I want to do more work because I feel good about that click. Stupid as it can be to a lot of people, but like for me, and I'm thinking about a vision of a program. Like, if you're that in love with something, and that, which hopefully you are about your life, your family's life, and then your program, you're going to think of all those things. So this whole vision that we're talking about is going to start really big, but like and Apple's had, decades to get there, right? We may be just starting on like this big, massive vision that we have so far to go on. But like, if it is what you're getting ready to talk about, this process, it's just getting down to those little things at some point.
It's the why part that's calls us to action. That's that feeling of like purpose, right? Like, we're so blessed because we get to wake up in the morning with a sense of purpose, which is pretty awesome, and not a lot of people get to do that. So.
Not a lot. Exactly what I was about to say is the percentage of people that wake up excited for their days is completely sad to talk to people in this world today and know that they're not excited to wake up.
Yeah, and I mean, as we talk about the necessity of why, that you've got to have that why, you've got to have that vision. It's the idea that, vision is actually, it's a picture of the future that you want that produces a passion in your heart. Right. And so, what is that picture of your preferred future that produces a passion for you? If you don't know where you're going, Matthew Kelly in this book says, then you're lost. Right. And so the start of it is this why, and it's a process. It's going to take time. It's going to take a willingness to grow. And, one way that the book talks about it is it talks about the story of the Magi, right? And they had their star that they followed. And the biggest piece of this is that there's steps. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to have patience, right? Everybody wants that vision and to know what they're supposed to be doing and how they get there now, immediately. But sometimes it takes patience. Another piece of it is you got to discover who you are and what you're capable of. And so there's, a multitude of opportunities out there to discover that. And one of the ones that I love a lot, and we're going to have a webinar on it. I use it with my students all the time, is StrengthsFinder. And it's a great tool to do that. You can use Enneagram, you can use all of these different ones, but StrengthsFinder is that one that I love. And so as you're discovering who you are and what you're capable of, I would highly recommend, and we'll get into that too. But it's everybody's good at something. So finding your star, what is your star? That thing that's going to drive you, that vision of a preferred future that you want, right? Life, here we were talking about Apple and the products. I'm the same way. I've always got to get the latest gadget or whatever. But really, life isn't about doing. Life isn't about having stuff. At the end of the day, at the end of your life, none of that stuff is going to matter. But if you have that why and that thing that you chase that you're passionate about, that's what's going to matter. The first one for me is got to be family, right? There's got to be something involved with family, and that, but that's what produces a passion for me. I've heard Thad talk about, this a lot. I heard him talking about it with his players when he went to, another high school after Blacksburg and coaching with us. And he was just talking about it, at your funeral, what is it that's going to be said? It's not going to be, well, that person had, this really nice car, or, was always at the top of the gadget game. It's not about those things. I mean, Thad, you can explain that a little bit better than I can, but I know it's also from a great book as well.
Yeah. I mean, this, the first time I ever really thought or did this, maybe it was a Tony Robbins course or something I was doing. And it was really trying to get you to think about different points in your life. Like, what were you interested in elementary school? Moving on to your life, where you are today, and then what do you want 10 years, 20 years? But then ultimately, it's like one of the main questions, and I've done this two different ways. One way was, if you could talk to the 100-year-old version of yourself, what would the 100-year-old version of yourself say to you? Which was very transformative for me at a point in my life about 3 years ago doing that. And then the other is, if you could kind of be a fly on the wall at your own funeral, what would it be like? And so, I literally got in, I tried to do a lot of meditation and trying to get my right frame of mind in terms of this, talking to the 100-year-old version of myself. And I, felt really strong. Like literally, I mean, I know, so like I tell my players about this, and I'm aware that a lot of players are like, this coach is going crazy right now. But it's like, man, like I literally felt like I was telling myself, life is short. You need to slow down. You need to not rush through it. And that was kind of my big message to myself. And then when my grandfather passed away, one of my grandfathers passed away a couple years ago. And, as he was on his deathbed, and he was bedridden for over 10 years at the end of life, was in the Navy, got hurt on a ship directing traffic of planes, and basically just kind of, wasn't treated best for that through the VA. And it just sucked, man, just to watch the end of his life. And he was just stuck in a bed, and he was on a farm too. Like they had horses, they had a lot of stuff. And he was 10 years. He would just look out the window and talk about one day wanting to ride his horses again and that kind of stuff. And he just knew it wasn't going to happen. But it was just, he was a very big entrepreneur, big into things. But long story short, like on his deathbed a couple years ago, you just realize, you start thinking like, man, like at this point in your life right now, you've lived your life, you're at the end of it. Like, who's there for one? Like, who's coming to see him at the hospital? Who's there at this hospice or spending these last couple of days, and who's thinking about that person? So one, that really puts into perspective, like with the time you have in this world, the people that are going to think about you the most at the end or fill your life at the end that you did, really kind of puts in perspective again of like, who should I be thinking about a lot in my life and helping? But again, yes, like are you going to be happy if your life ended in the next couple days, couple weeks? Are you going to be happy with at least the path you were on? You may not have gotten done what you were going to do, but are you happy on this path that you're going down? The growth that you've experienced over the last X amount of years, especially since you like awakened to like your calling, or if you haven't got there yet, what has that been like? And how many, it's almost like you're trying to say good day, bad day. Like I had a good day towards it, I had a bad day towards it. And so like, do I feel good on this process? And that's been very challenging to me. And as we're entering this Memorial Day weekend, we talked about this too before we got on today. I was watching a war movie last night and just like realizing how blessed we have, so many of us having this in our world right now, when it wasn't that long ago when when we were having some really, really, really big wars with a lot of people dying from them. And it's just, without getting too political with all this, it's just in terms of just understanding how blessed we should be. And then it's like, man, are we really living up to our potential with the freedom that we have right now, with the luxuries that we have? Are we really influencing others that we could be? I mean, it's just so much, it makes you really question life. And so it's a really good talk for the time that for the weekend that we have right now, because of the freedom we have from that.
No doubt. Yeah. So, I mean, as we, kind of think about that, that kind of sets the tone for life being about becoming, right? How can you be the best version of yourself? And part of that is knowing your why, and, the necessity of having that why. It's the idea that in order to become, the best version of yourself, you've got to know, what are you passionate about? What does that look like? This is, from the book as well. What are you passionate about? What's your desires? What were you born to do? What are the gifts that you have? And that's one thing where I talked about StrengthsFinder, is it's a great tool to be able to kind of know what's innate in you. And then what do you need to thrive? And in the middle of that, right, where those things intersect, is the best version of yourself. And being able to get to that best version of yourself is necessary for you to, live up to the potential that you have, that all of us have, and be able to impact and influence others So as you serve them in life, and you have to do this as a coach. And, no matter, if it's, basketball or softball or volleyball or football, whatever it may be, you have to be the best version of yourself, or else you aren't going to help your athletes be the best version of their self. There's no way around it. In order for you to influence, you've got to be in a position to influence. And I think a lot of times we fail at that. A lot of times, whether it's our institutions or whatever, but we just kind of get on a path and we just grind, and you always hear that word, right? I'm grinding. Life shouldn't be about grinding, right? It should come naturally and should flow from who we are. And that's the way we influence people, not just beating people over the head with something. I think those are, just really important pieces to be thinking about.
Talking about the institution and in terms of failing and making it difficult, and just this, this is widespread, whether we're talking about schools or businesses or the governments or anything, in terms of again, my parents, they didn't really have the luxury to really have a lot of free time to really think about life, maybe as much as I am blessed with, in the sense of they graduated, they went to work, and they tried to feed their family and those kind of things. And definitely their grandparents. And the further we've gotten away from the harder times in terms of making a living, the more we're blessed to have this time to think. But it's like our institutions haven't caught up with that. And so, my mom and dad, again, basically just worked their tails off and still are. But we never really talked about a lot of why. We never talked about, it was basically what's the best way can you make a living? Like get a better education, get a better paying job, do the best you can with that. And there was never why should you go to this college? Why should you get this degree? Why should you do this job? And that, even without asking why, just what would you be interested in? More so than hey, I've heard that this job is making a lot of money. It's going to be in demand. When you get out of college, this job is going to be in demand. It's I don't care. I want to enjoy my days. But then sometimes, like I said, it kind of feels dang, my parents didn't think about that. They just did what they did to give me food every night. And yet here I am. I being selfish, but I really go back and forth. And we've talked about this being a process. If there's anybody that needs this talk, it's me. And these guys know me, better than just about anybody other than my family. And that's essentially who I am. I have been really hardcore down this path for at least 10 years of, I would say 10 years of thinking about purpose and those things. And probably the last 5, hardcore on this path. And I still sometimes feel like I haven't moved an inch in terms of what am I supposed to be doing with my life. I believe it. If y'all saw my journals, I don't know how many of these, and it's if you read the ones from a couple years ago, they're pretty much feel like I'm saying the same thing still in the mornings. And so it's still this constant loop. And that's one of my struggles is I think too much, which I'm on the other end of the spectrum, where I think a lot of coaches are on that end of they work their tails off and they just grind and they just work. And I've as a younger coach, I definitely grind and work and all that. And then I've shifted so far over to this. I want to make sure I'm not wasting our people's lives, our players' lives, our coaches' lives. I want to make sure we're so on vision and on point to what we want to do. I don't want to waste any time and anything. So I'm spending so much time thinking nah, I don't want to do. So then I get paralyzed sometimes. And so, but the reason I'm bringing this up right now is because we're talking about there's just not a good process for this right now to teach people how to go from, and I've talked about this before too. And even church is a lot about why and how live, but there's not a lot of how to it. I've struggled on that. How do I go from, okay, this is what I believe, God's got a calling for me. Right. But I don't know how to get there. I don't know the how. I know I'm supposed to love people, care about people, serve people, this and that, but how do I do it based off of my strengths? So we don't talk a lot about strengths in that, in terms of you may learn about it and the purpose behind it, but how do we get there? And so, and without trying to get too much of a tangent, I'm just letting everybody know that's listening to this, I am by far nowhere close to being perfect down this. I am still struggling. I'm leaning literally daily in prayers and thoughts and journaling and taking walks and thinking of like, is this my path? I'm not talking about the vision for my program and those type of things. Like, is this my path? Is this what I should do? Like, it is like I coach football, right? So it's like, do I want to be on my deathbed giving every ounce of my effort to the game of football? Right. And like right now I've got a role of an athletic director as well as a teacher, husband, father, all these things. So like my mind is so many different directions, as these guys would tell you, like it's everywhere all the time. And it's very hard. And so lately, over the last couple of weeks, I've been like, I don't know that I'm supposed to be so focused. And Brett, when me and Brett were talking about this the other day of like, you know, there could be multiple visions, right? There's not just one. So it's like, for me, it's like if I think that I'm going to have this for my whole life, this tunnel vision on one thing, I'm like, nope, I can't do that. Like I need like different things. So there's I think there's also some conflicting information out there on a vision, on a why, that kind of, because we don't have a good method for it. And the fact that you are a coach that young people will be drawn to you, why can't we be the ones that help people with this process? I don't know.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I'll let people know what I do for a living. You know, so I'm a campus minister. I'm a United Methodist pastor, and you know, that is not where I envisioned myself when I felt a call into ministry, right? And so it's the idea of a call, a vision, a purpose, whatever that may be. You know, it can be different things in different times, and but sometimes that's a challenge, right? And you kind of got to live in that moment in the vision that you have. But I think it's also a greater vision to kind of draw out and kind of have that perspective that you were talking about earlier, Thad, and be able to say, you know, what's my overall vision for my life? And then what are the steps that I need to get there? And part of that is knowing where you are right now, right? So knowing where you are is your context. What does that look like? And figuring out where you want to be is your vision. And so one of the biggest things is you got to know where you are in order to get to where you want to be, you know? And so Andy Stanley, you know, he says, you know, vision is born in the soul of a person who's consumed with the tension between what is and what could be. And I think that's the biggest thing, is you always got to be thinking what could be, and knowing where you are. The way that I think about it is, you know, I guess you don't really have many malls anymore, but, you know, a mall or an airport, and you look at that map and it says, you know, the red dot that says you are here. I went mountain biking today, and I had to look at the map several times, and I was like, all right, I got to know where I'm at so I don't get lost. But I knew where I wanted to get to, right? I wanted to get back to the parking lot, or if you're in an airport, you got to get to Terminal B and you're in Terminal A, whatever that is. If you didn't have that dot that says you are here, you can look at that map and you can say, I want to be at this other place, but you wouldn't have an idea to get there because you didn't know where you are, right? And so in order to get to where you want to be, you got to know where you are. And part of that's knowing your current reality, both inside and outside of yourself, both positive and negative. You've got to take that internal look and say, all right, you know, here's what's going on with me. Here's what's going on in my community and those around me, and positive and negative. And so you have to do that in a way that's, you know, you're not sugarcoating it, but you've got to really find that perspective of, this is where I'm at. You know, some of those key ingredients would be your lifestyle, your habits, your situation, your environment. You know, what are all of those things? In order to get a clear picture of your current reality, both positive and negative, you know, you can't produce a vision without that. There's no way you can have a strategy to come up with it if you don't have that understanding. In Rhythm of Life, it talks about, you know, point A is knowing who you are, taking a good look at yourself, write it down. If you want to process, Dad talked about journaling, you know, write it down. Take a long look at yourself and your situation and put it down in something so that you can go back and look at it. And in many ways, it's that looking back and being able to say, like, oh my gosh, look how far I've come, right? And then put a point B. Where do you want to go? What's that dream? What's that goal? What's that vision? Don't allow anything to limit it. But what would it be? What is your why if there were, you know, nothing that could get in the way? And so, you know, your point B is your why. You know, your point A is your context. And if you want to have the best version of yourself, you've got to know both. So, you know, I don't know if y'all have any more to add about that.
I mean, it's just, to me, it's just this, I mean, when you talk to people today, I mean, you can talk to any adults, right? And you just kind of talk to them about life. And then like within a couple minutes, you can kind of sense it's like, dang, man, they don't have a vision. Like they don't have a point B. And sometimes like my dad, another is going back to my dad on this stuff is, like he never had, he's today, he doesn't have a point B. Like he is the most present person that you could ever think of ever. Like he's constantly just like alive right now and without thinking down the road. And like, I envy that sometimes,
I
but,
was gonna say that's sometimes me, right? Like I'm just like, man, if I could just turn this off and exist for like 5 minutes without the concerns and some of the stuff we're getting ready to talk about, the fears, the whatever that kind of detract from your vision, like I would love that opportunity. But also like it's a dangerous thing. Like I refuse to let myself do that too, because I don't want to come off course, right? Like I don't want to fall off the path, So
I
as
mean,
much as I want to tune out, I'm just afraid to, because I don't want to fall off the path,
yeah, falling off the path is a good thought. I've talked to the players about this before. If you imagine like a cliff face, that's got different steps going up, and if you're rock climbing, or if you could just think about like this really steep thing you're trying to climb with steps. And so to get from point A, which is down here, to point B, you do have to look, you take your look up top and be like, okay, that's how far I have to go. But it's all these, little steps where you got to like, you start by looking up, getting your vision of everything, but then you focus back down. It's like, okay, today I'm taking one step. All right. Then tomorrow I'm taking another step. And then, if I'm lacking motivation, I might be like, okay, I'm going to take a peek at the top to see just where are we going? Are we going at least on the right path? Because if you think of a cliff face, if you don't look where you're going, you're going to get stuck sometimes because there's like an overhang or something. So you might have to change course and find your way around it. So you do have to look back up, but it's coming back down to focus on, let's say if we're going from point A to Z, then you can't go from A to Z. Like you go B, C, D. So it's going in those, so that's a metaphor I try to keep in my mind, because I'm the one that wants to go from A to Z and not take those steps in between.
Yeah, you've got to have that process. You got to have those system steps, and that's something that we're definitely going to be talking about and breaking down a lot more. We want you to kind of know that top portion of your vision, right? The place that you want to get to, and then we're going to build it from there. And that's a big piece. One of the things we're wanting to do is for you all to build a coaching action plan, something that, you can start from the ground up and kind of get to that vision that you have. There's a lot of things though. I mean, one of them you talked about is if you only focus at, the vision at the peak, then you're going to miss that handhold, right? Like, and so there are those things that hinder vision, the idea of tradition, right? Well, this is the way coaching's always been, and this is the way coaching is going to be. And so I've got to do it. We've
always done it this way.
Yeah, we've always done it this way. I mean, how many times do we hear that? Fear, being scared to take that step and to do things differently. I mean, I think that's, something Thad's talked about a ton, and Brandon as well, is that we are really, as coaches in whatever profession of coaching, we're a lot of copycat people, right? Like we just do what that other person is doing, and it's out of fear, because we don't want to step outside and fail. But when really in reality, right, failure is something that has to happen for you to be able to get to your vision. It's going to happen. If you're not striving for something and you're not failing at it, then you're probably not trying hard enough. But so fear is something that hinders that. Stereotypes, kind of what I just talked about, that lack of passion. And then, so, I mean, those are just things that will hinder vision. And I think the biggest piece, and this is where, I'll end and shut up and let y'all kind of finish it, but is you can't do it alone. Nothing in life is that way. And you've got to have you need love and the help of others. We hope to be that for you all at Coach Drive. I know that with Thad and Brandon, if there's ever anything that I need, there are going to be people that have my back. And, family, whatever that is, you've got to have a support system and a group of people around you to help you get to vision, no matter what it is. Because you're never going to be able to do it, in a solo heroic way.
I'll say, like last night, for example. I mean, this is no joke, guys. What I tell you, like I've been thinking about this for at least 10 years, but really seriously for 5 years, and still yet, I'll still have my days where it's like, dang, I really don't know. I'll get literally, it's like I can't do anything today because I'm afraid I'm going to take us off course, like my life off course, because like I don't know the exact vision I'm trying to go down right now. And so a couple things that's helped me, one is because I'm a coach, when we're talking to coaches, is you can kind of align this with the seasons of a coach because, and I wrote an article about this one time, and it was basically, like we as coaches break it down into, out of season, preseason, postseason, in season, all these things. And so, like for me, I try to say, okay, once the season's over, I really try to take a break and be like, okay, let me just shut my mind off entirely. And it might be for a couple days, it might be for a couple weeks, but until I feel good, I'm going to shut it down. And then the next step is be like, okay, I'm not thinking about my sport. I'm going to be thinking about life right now. And I need to take, and I know, I've read about some people that'll literally take a vacation for a week away from family, everybody, just to go to a hotel, Airbnb or something, and just spend that week to think, read a couple books, and to kind of plan. So I really like that thought for myself, at least, because I'm so calendar structured. Like I need a deadline. That's one of the biggest things I've learned is I need a deadline to get things done, which we'll talk about getting things done later. But that's that season. When I'm in season, I've got because of football, I got a game every week. So I've got a process that I got to stick to. When we're in the out of season, there's very few deadlines. So it's like, I'm just free to do whatever. So after the season's over, it's like, I want to spend some time thinking. And then what I'd like to do, which I'm not good at, is like, okay, I'm going to plan out, and let's say at least the next 6 months of this off season or the next 3 months, at least, not like one day, because I'll wake up the next day and replan again. When it's like, let's just come up with a good plan for this off season and then go execute it. And maybe once a month, I'll revisit this and shut it back down. So that's, again, kind of like looking up, looking down, looking up, looking down, and executing. So, but I'll say, like, I'll get off course with that. And my whole point I'm trying to come back to is what Brett kind of closed this with. And this is my last point in terms of family is, last night, walked upstairs and kids were in bed and just sat down and talked with my wife and Rachel. And it was just kind of like, like just started talking about kind of my problems and vision. And like, she doesn't like live my life. I was obviously meaning like, she doesn't like sit here and like getting this stewing thoughts in my brain nonstop, but like just talking to her for like 5 minutes. She's like, well, why don't you just like do this? I'm like, you're probably right. It's like all this like hours of sitting down here thinking, journaling, walking. And she's like, because she can like step away from my brain a little bit and thoughts. And I was like, dang, that was probably pretty good.
That's pretty funny. So, that in Andy Stanley's book, Visionary, he talks about that and seeing it through somebody else's eyes, right? That fresh perspective is so valuable. And so like, I love those moments when I'm talking to one of you guys or somebody else. And I'm just like, oh yeah, that's great. And something, Brett, you talked about earlier too, just a second ago, is like, you can't do this alone. That was something I had to learn the long, hard way. This was like, I'm a coach, right? I'm a guy's guy. Like, check this beard out. I don't need anybody's help. Like I can do this. And so to like take a step back and be okay with needing help and needing guidance is awesome. And, and there are people out there like that want to be part of that solution. So if you can cast your vision out there and allow people to be a part of it, you'll find that people are willing to help you and that they're going to be there to carry you through some of the tougher times.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys, or everybody for being on tonight, and hope you enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day weekend, and know that we'll have this on, our YouTube channel shortly, and then look out for the podcast as well. And our course will be up on CoachTube before long, and all that we've talked about will go in a lot more depth. And also, always reach out to us. You can find us on Twitter or anything else. But just glad y'all are with us.
See you guys. Count your blessings this weekend.
See you guys. Thanks.